So this is a very common issue in teens, and they are a population that do have difficulty falling asleep and maintaining society's standards of like needing to wake up for school and all of that. So there are many reasons for this, and it's usually to do with environmental things and not because they just want to stay up and they're teenagers and this is what teens do. And again, part of it is that they do that, but they need some guidance and some explanation of why that might not be the most helpful choice. One of the most significant barriers that teenagers face is a natural circadian rhythm shift, where they're naturally inclined to fall asleep later. So as they hit teenland and puberty and things start to change hormonally, that's when the circadian rhythm also shifts to a later bedtime. If their natural rhythm has shifted, and you'll probably know this because they used to go to bed earlier and now they don't, thinking back to that sleep pressure slide and the circadian rhythm, and it's no wonder they start to develop symptoms of delayed onset to sleep, where their goal sleep time of 9 p.m., where they used to fall asleep fine, is no longer feasible, and they're laying in bed for hours until sleep takes over. Another barrier is homework and timing of school systems. So high schools tend to start earlier, and students are expected to maybe even go to band practice before school. I remember trying to get there, and it was just, the bus would leave at like 6:45. Or other extracurriculars before school. This can lead to extreme early mornings. And for someone who has trouble going to sleep at 9 p.m. and has to be up and needs 9 to 11 hours of sleep, but they have to be up at 6, well, it's just not going to happen. There's some research being done to try to change the schedules for students and try to educate the school systems on why this might be important. Next is extracurricular activities. Adolescents may participate in sports, extra tutoring after class, that interfere with that evening routine and allowing them to settle down. So remember that cortisol too, it needs to be lower in the evening. So if there are things that are spiking stress in the evenings, then that can also mess with having to fall asleep. And then sometimes dinner becomes later because of the extracurricular activities, and it's just not helpful for maintaining that optimal sleep conditions. TV and screen use is common among teens. They become more independent when it comes to video games, using of their devices, social media, FaceTime, you name it. They're constantly connected with their peers. They're constantly connected to the online world. Not everyone, but I feel like it's a commonality, and it's impacting their sleep quality and likely the melatonin production into the evenings. Socializing with friends via online or in person later into the evenings after all the extracurricular activities are done are common because, again, peers are also become more important at that time. And now they have access to them 24/7. So that's something to consider when working with teens. And lastly, understanding that teens are struggling to meet expectations when it comes to the sleep schedules that are placed right now. They're constantly accumulating that sleep debt, and they're never able to fully catch up. If you have a teen that is sleeping so long on the weekends, it is likely they are significantly sleep deprived from the week. Sleep deprivation in teens can lead to mental health issues like increased anxiety, depression, mood regulation, behavioral challenges, impulsivity, health, just basic health issues like obesity and more. So showing some compassion for the teens, I always like to make sure that we have this to kind of help frame the picture of working with a teenager. So here's the case study. Working with a teenager, again, to consolidate sleep, teaching them to sleep longer, and to reduce night wakings. So this is a teen, ASD diagnosis, ADHD diagnosis. Sleep had been an issue since infancy. I think in infancy, sleeping for 20 minutes at a time, sleep was always sporadic, and sleeping long was tough. And I think at this point, 13, 14 years old. So I can imagine it's more than frustrating, both for the parents and the teenager. Other forms of support were tried, like melatonin, but it wasn't effective in reducing those night wakings. And this teen also had a hard time going back to sleep during the most alert going back to sleep during those more alert stages in the night. So when those natural wakings would occur, difficulty falling back asleep was present. There was also extreme daytime tiredness, always feeling tired and never rested. I felt so terrible, and I feel like she also just wanted support, and making it difficult to participate in academic tasks and just the daily expectations that are required of a teenager. Wasn't able to always wake up for activities, and focus in school was really tough. The initial meeting was had with just the parent to explain the current sleep problems, history, and ways that the teen learns best, and how to connect with this teen. Because without connection, we're not going to get anywhere. It's important that the teen trusts and wants to make change, and figure out how to get them on board with that. Otherwise, you're not going to make too much progress, especially when it comes to screens and devices and changing rules around the home. All meetings going forward included the teen in the discussion, and that teen was the main focus. We talked, and the parent would sit and maybe provide more information if needed, but mostly all the information came directly from the teenager. When coming up with the goals, the teen wanted to feel rested in the morning upon waking. They hated waking up and being miserable and groggy, and so they really wanted to wake up feeling rested. Sleeping through the night without having trouble falling back to sleep, and to fall asleep quickly and easily without having to wait in bed for sleep to come. So in this case, when they woke up, they would just lie there, and thoughts probably would ruminate. They'd just wait and wait and wait until sleep actually came, and sometimes that would be hours. This teenager, again, like I said, had been having difficulty since infancy, so was very frustrated with this progress, and nothing had really changed. So I worked closely with them to develop that plan. And to help with independence and autonomy, we used the Apple Watch to collect data, and this worked quite well to provide the teen with that kind of control, as well as they could see the improvements. I then graphed this data, which did really help, because some nights we'd get on a phone call, or some days we'd get on a phone call and it would feel like nothing had changed, but the graphs did really show some improvement. We'll go into that. So the first part, after assessment, we realized there's no real routine in place. And this was a case that had we just got, and it was just after the start of COVID, and school had been put into an online format. So there's really no need to wake up at any point. The regular daily routine of meals and exercise were non-existent at this point. So the first step to building success was to develop a routine that the teen was okay with following, and when deciding the routine, explaining the rationale behind why the changes needed to be made, helped with understanding why the recommendations were happening. I found it gave them information because this student did really want to know why, especially if I'm going to limit things like screen time. The strategy we used to help the students self-monitor throughout the day was a printed outline of what to do basically every, I'd say, few hours. It would be blocked off into like a couple hour chunks of the day. And this teen really liked that structure, and I feel like it helped the parent too to be accountable and check in, but not a lot was needed. With the family, we structured meal times, as the previous philosophy was to just grab something when hungry, mostly snack foods, as parents were busy working from home, and there's a lot going on. So the parent understood the importance of setting structured meals and also started to follow along and model this, which helped with the teen to follow along as well. With school being canceled, kind of, but being out and all extracurriculars canceled, we brainstormed together different physical activities, ideas that were of interest to the teen, and something easy for them to do. So maybe it was walking the dog, going for a bike ride, scootering around, those sorts of things, and embedding that into optimal times of the day. And in the visual schedule, we discussed scheduling screen use. Again, the rationale of understanding why screens actually may be causing the difficulty to fall asleep was effective. It worked in this case, and I'd say it doesn't always work, but I think sometimes just giving information is power. And we had screens available for most of the day. And this was a decision that was made in collaboration with the parent. Parent was okay with this, and student was also okay with this. We reduced screen time about 1.5 hours before a scheduled bedtime, and the teen was okay with that because we had talked about it and we discussed where the screens would go, what we would do with them, what are the rules and parameters around that. It was the honor system though, because no one else was awake an hour and a half before this teen had to go to bed. Part 2, we adjusted the bedroom and the chill space. So with teenagers, they start to love to spend a lot of time alone in their room. Autonomy and privacy is a common value among adolescents, and that can impact the association between bed and sleep if they spend too much time in there. We've talked about that a little bit already. Personally, I was also this teenager once I had access to a laptop and streaming shows when that was a thing. DVD watching was available on a portable device. I was more likely to go into my room rather than sit down in the family room and watch TV with family. So to ensure that teens are not spending too much time in their bed, in their bedroom, doing things other than sleeping, it's important to create some sort of chill zone where they can have similar privacy, alone time, but maybe out of their bed and out of their bedroom if it's possible. And recognizing, and that's something we do ask, is how much space is in the home? What's realistic for you? And do we need to create just a fun corner in the room that's very different from the bed so that they're comfortable going to sit there versus sitting on the bed? In this case, we created a space where the cool, funky, non-sleep inducing lights could be placed, a comfy chair or sofa was available to hang out and chill on screens, and it became a room that they wanted to be in. Also, talking with the parent about if the teen was in there and had asked for alone time, then that's okay, and allowing that space for them to hang out on their own. Okay. We also added in a fan because it was a house in a very hot place. And we also removed the phones from the bedroom, and that was just a family decision. And everyone modeled it. Parents, siblings, everybody had to abide by the rule. Part 3. So now we're getting into how can we adjust the sleep so that the likelihood of falling asleep is present, and that sleep pressure and optimizing sleep pressure and the circadian rhythm drive together. So now the preventive work was done. We had a daily routine. We had a new bedtime routine. And because the teen was falling asleep much later than anyone in the house, so this was very much a night owl, there was no way they were going to fall asleep at an earlier time right away. This is when we implemented something called bedtime fading. Bedtime fading is quite effective. It's a strategy that supports the likelihood the individual will fall asleep within 15 to 30 minutes of going to bed. When calculating this, you're using your data that you had in your sleep diary, and you're calculating the average fall asleep time. So on average, what time are they actually falling asleep? So if it's, in this case, it was 12:30 was the average, and we added 30 minutes to that average time. And you bet when I told this teen they didn't have to go to bed till 1 a.m., they were just like so excited. They're like, really? That's it? That felt realistic to them in this moment. Wake time remained consistent between 10 and 10:30. Again, it was during COVID, so there was flexibility with routines and wake up time. And then it also went into the summertime schedule as well, so there was some wiggle room here. To support wake up, we decided that mom would come in 15 minutes before wake up and open the blinds without saying anything. Because the teen had expressed that it's annoying when the mom comes in and tries to wake them up right out of a deep sleep. They're groggy, there becomes arguments, and it's just an unpleasant time for everybody. So a strategy that's helpful is opening those blinds and using light to lift them out of if they're in a REM sleep cycle, which they most likely are, and that's usually when we feel the groggiest and most miserable when we wake up. In this case, we're lucky, again, as the school schedule didn't interfere with our plan. There's some risks and benefits to anything, and so for the risks for this one to bedtime fading is that they may not fall asleep right away, or, because we got the math wrong, and may get less sleep over the first few nights. The benefits are that there's less time spent in bed awake. And this can also decrease night wakings as long as wake time keeps consistent as well. The data was tracked using the Apple Watch, as I said, and the student would send pictures to the parent, and the parent would forward that to me, and then we track that via some visuals just to show improvement. And again, just as a side note, Apple Watches, I don't know how effective they are or how accurate. They're not 100%, but they do provide a pretty clear idea of sleep quality, especially if you can get the before picture and the after. Okay. Part 4, we had a plan for night wakings. So again, the parent's not involved in the night waking because the parent's busy sleeping. When it came to night wakings, we discussed 2 options. And when working with kids and teens, if you can provide options that is most helpful, as it allows some autonomy again, and building into that value, as well as a more chance of buying into the plan and what they think will work best for them. The 2 options in this case were if you wake up and you know you're not going to go fall back asleep, which is common. We all kind of know if we're lying there, we're not falling back asleep anytime soon. They can get out of bed, turn on their red light reading lamp, and read for about 15 to 30 minutes and just keep it nice and calm. We discussed sitting up in bed if getting out of bed wasn't possible, and sitting on the other end just to make sure it was really clear to your body, okay, we're not quite sleepy yet, and we're not laying in that sleep position. Option 2 was sleep restriction. As I explained this idea to the teen, they were definitely not into it. They didn't like the idea of less sleep. So we opted for option 1, and the teen was fine with following that plan. They would get out of bed if needed and do a little bit of a read and then fall back to sleep. There was trust in the sleeper, and so I had to let go of the control that I liked, and the parent also let go of a bit of control there too. The logic made sense to them, so explaining a lot of the whys behind it, and they chose to go with option 1, and they did very well. Here we go. Okay. Now I'm sure everyone's wondering, what about when school starts and we actually have to get up at a certain time? So we did plan for that. We had success, and we'll show the graphs about that. But we were able to work together to shift the schedule earlier for that September start, because school was coming, and there was no way we're going to bed at 1 a.m. or even midnight or 11 a.m. is enough. So the process of working with the teen lasted almost 3 months from the start to the finish, and we did intermittent check-ins at this point. There was no rush for completion, and consultation was provided on an as-needed basis when new goals emerged. For school to fade bedtime to an earlier time, the daily schedule, so from wake time and the physical activity, everything that we had listed, we shifted to a new time of the day by 15 minutes. So the parents supported the teen in managing this component and just making sure the numbers were correct. And then by the time school started, teen was falling asleep between 10:30 and waking up around 7-ish. Slow fading was needed. Again, as you remember, it's much harder for our body clocks to move backwards. There is a natural tendency to move forward. So really looking at it from a whole picture from the moment we wake up to the time we go to bed is helpful. And results. Okay. So this is the data that was taken from the information found on the Apple Watch, graphed it. In baseline, we can see in the gray, sleep is quite sporadic, ranging from 11 hours to sometimes under 4 hours. And those 4-hour nights were really hard. There's lots of catch-up, lots of dips. So overall, when we put in the new routine, consistent wake-up, consistent bedtime, we started to see sleep consolidate. The family, again, stopped collecting data at this point, so you see follow-up in August. And we just checked in for the school as the data, I think, became a bit too overwhelming for the teen after we had collected, as you can see, many, many days. But over time, there was a lot of progress, which is great. And reports of feeling rested. And the night wakings, if they did happen, were not really memorable. And that was a success. So again, overall night wakings went down. So this graph looks at the total duration of night wakings As you can see, they ranged between under like 60, 70 minutes. We've got some are like 10 minutes or some are non-existent, and others are up to over 200 minutes. And that's baseline, and then it went right down as soon as we started to keep a really strict schedule and change the daily routines and the nighttime routines. So we maintained consistent wake times throughout the summer, so 10:45 range. There was less arguing in the morning, there was more. Everyone was pretty happy with that, and this allowed the teen to stay up a bit later, which was exciting. They followed the routine quite well, and the parent did well too in collaborating with them. Okay. Now we did have a question that came in the pre-survey. So it says, how can I give my teen information he'll listen to when he's in the autonomy building phase of life? So again, we've talked about that a little bit here, and that's quite important to teens. Not all, but most, I'd say, at least most that I've met. It's important to recognize that that's a value of theirs and understand that how can we incorporate that in the plan? How can we involve them in the plan and support their autonomy when it comes to solving their own problems? If health becomes a value of theirs, or if autonomy and health are a value, you may frame it in a way that can support their health. So that's where that understanding of the sleep science behind it, why we have to do screens less, why video games might be activating our brain and making it tricky to sleep can be helpful. From my experience working with teens, it's collaboration all the way and including them in all the decision making and problem solving, just so that they can express their concerns and what they would like, as well as them hearing parent concerns and trying to come to a common ground. I have a slide here that goes through tips for success when collaborating with teens. And really you want to be able to identify their values and their goals. So including them in the plan is absolutely essential if you can. Even making sure they have some sort of say and adapting that in a way that you can do that. From visually showing and tracking progress can help teens see that their efforts are paying off. And so that's been a success for me working with teens and adults. Visually seeing, hey, I'm making progress and doing this hard thing can be helpful to keep motivation and keep those routines sustained. Some ideas are to track number of night wakings, like number of minutes to fall asleep, and total sleep duration. So again, using your sleep journal as much as you can. Setting realistic expectations when it comes to screen use with teens and setting bedtimes. So remember, teens have a natural tendency to want to fall asleep later. Their body clock is on a different schedule than maybe adults and young kids, so they're experiencing they're not tired. So this will return normal into their mid-20s, and they'll start to want to go to bed at a decent time. Screen use is also something to monitor, and including the teen into the decision-making around the family rules and boundaries will be helpful. Also, being mindful of parent behavior and others in the house. They're modeling healthy screen use can be helpful if you're telling them not to, or telling them to put their screens away, but then parents have their screens open. That can cause some conflicts. They're like, why do I have to do it? To ensure success, starting with one simple change may be a good way to start, and then slowly building upon that success.